Hello, everyone, and welcome to LeeLa. I'm Lee Philbrook. The intention of the LeeLa community is really to transform conversations and practices into actions that make a difference. And the word LeeLa comes from Sanskrit, and it means divine or creative play. It literally translates to your story, and we love to tell others' stories. I'm excited for the show this evening. We're going to start off with a quick background on us, your hosts, followed by an opening intention. And today is the first day of fall, and it's perfect timing for our guest this evening, Tonia Cordi, who will share her process of organizing. Our spaces and how we spend our time are mirror reflections of what's happening inside. Tonia Cordi works with people to help them better understand these reflections and make changes in all aspects of their lives. We'll then do our closing intentions and final announcements. So a little bit of housekeeping. We encourage you to have your cameras on. Really facilitates a sense of community and connection. And we appreciate if you're eating dinner, leave your cameras off. And we also love questions, so please feel free to put questions in the chat box. So here we go, over to my co-host, Lisa English.
Welcome to LeeLa, everyone. This is a space where you can all learn, explore, and most importantly, have fun. It's also a place where we hope to inspire you all to live an intentional life. I'm a high school teacher, entrepreneur, and content creator. And I'm so excited for tonight's session with Tanya because we're pretty much the same person. We're both teachers and really organized, and I'm very excited to learn about her process. And with that being said, I'm going to pass it back over to my co-host. Here's Lee.
My business as a life and career coach has me working with women who are feeling discontent with their lives. I've noticed they want things to change and yet they feel stuck. One of my former clients once said to me, the coaching process allowed her to let go of the emotions and beliefs that no longer served her and step forward into her full potential. I'm absolutely passionate about supporting women in creating new possibilities so that they can live their best lives. So now I'd like to do our opening intention that really connects us and holds the space for the evening. So please close your eyes. May divine grace surround us, uphold us, and cherish us all. May it support us and our sacred trust and community. May we be strong together and our journeys be brighter and higher for having walked side by side. May we be guides for others and ourselves with clarity, tenderness, and light. Feeling gentle in our minds and clear with our words. Being strong in our creations, sending peace in all directions of time. With gratitude, we take this moment to arrive and join together. Open your eyes and welcome to the room. And now over to Lisa to introduce our special guest.
Tonia Cordi helps people get their life organized so that they can better manage their time, spaces, and mental health. She started her career as a teacher and after 12 years, decided that she wanted to follow her passion of helping people create spaces to match their values and life purpose. Soon after starting Time and Space Solutions, she realized that while an organized space can be transformative, it was only the first step in making the space to grow and evolve. She started to apply her background in education, the arts, and psychology, along with trial and error, to create an integrated process for individuals to live out their values and to have spaces that support them. It is now my pleasure to welcome our special guest of the evening, Tonia Cordi. Welcome, Tanya.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
We're so happy to have you here tonight. Thank you so much. So Tanya,
Thank you.
you were a teacher like myself, except you have a background in psychology. So how did you end up
Yes.
starting your company as an organization and business coach?
I think it actually, now that you asked that, and I'm thinking it in a different way, it started when I was a kid.
Wow.
I literally was 9 years old and I would take stuff out of my drawers and then get rid of things I wasn't using and then reorganize it. So I started way back then.
Wow.
As far as analyzing my behaviors and seeing how there's patterns, I wasn't doing that just yet at 9. When I went to teachers college, and even before that, I noticed that when I was living on my own in university and afterwards, when I started working, I was used to having helicopter parents that did everything for me. So then when I went to go do stuff for myself and I had to work and get groceries and do everything, this is a lot. I can't manage it. So I thought, okay, I want to have fun. I want to do my painting. I'm an artist as well. And I said, I have to do things quicker. And that's kind of when I started with myself. And then I did it with friends and family. And the idea for the actual business, I think, came when I was in teachers college. I had a placement teacher who was struggling with time management, who was struggling with meal prep, who was also struggling with mental illness, and just like life organization, like every aspect of it. And I said to her, oh, I can help you with this, and I can help you with this, and I can help you with this. And she's like, oh, you're an angel. And I was like, yeah, I could do this as a job, but I was in teachers college. I wasn't going to pursue it. And then after about 12 years of teaching, I was like, okay, I'm ready to do something different. And I was doing it more with people that I knew. And then I just started to pursue it. And it was, I think, from the beginning, a realization that it was more than just organizing your space. I knew that there was this behavioral aspect. I knew that there had to be change in the person, not just the space, and not just a storage solution to fix things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I find that people get nervous when I go to their houses now. And I laugh because it's like, no. I love it. I don't see the mess. I see the structure. I love architecture. I love design. So when I go in someone's home, I'm looking at the mess. I'm looking at the door frames. I'm looking at the baseboards maybe, or the type of furniture I have. So that is just a barrier, having all that stuff there. I don't see it that way. I see it as a place for transformation. So if I ever come to your house, don't worry.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. So yeah, like you said, really you're looking for possibilities and opportunities. So
exactly.
So what does getting organized really mean for you, Tanya?
I try not to break things into groups because I find that our culture tends to kind of segment everything, but everything's integrated. If I had to, I would say that on one side, there's these technical things like having surfaces clear, knowing where items are, having your space zoned in a way where there's focus areas. So I'm not mixing the activities, like I'm not having all my paperwork at the kitchen table when I'm eating, that sort of thing. And that any kind of storage solution that you're using, it's not a dumping zone. It's something that's practical and simple. And for me, it's also about being intentional with the space on a more, I guess you could say, like behavioral, interactive, inner way of looking at it, is that it's easier to focus. You're better able to stay connected to your values and your life purpose and be present because your space allows you to do that. I'm definitely more mindful with my time because it does carry over into your time management as well. And definitely way less stressful. And it's being ready for anything, because life, we can't plan every moment. I don't believe in being like to the extreme where you plan every minute of your day, but having things on hand. I always have things in my freezer ready to go so that if I have a busy week, I don't have to cook, just to make things easier that way. So it's really about creating a space that's easy to use. Anybody can walk into it and use it, as well as it being a reflection of your values and intentions.
I love that. And I definitely noticed myself as well. Like I can't work that well if there's lots of clutter around me. It clutters my brain, exactly what you're saying. So I love that.
I procrastinate. If it's not tidy, I procrastinate because I can't focus, right?
Yeah, I can appreciate that for sure. And Tanya, can you speak to some of the benefits? You touched on it right now, but can you speak to some of the benefits around getting organized for your mental health and, like you said, living out your purpose?
Definitely. Around mental health, it's funny. I just did a webinar this morning, and it was around how being organized is good for your mental health and how to set boundaries. And so really it's doing things as simple as being able to stay on top of meal prep and meal planning, being able to exercise, making time for a sleep routine and morning routine, because it does carry over into that time management piece, being way less stressed because you're less likely to ping pong. I make up these terms with the work that I do, but like people literally ping pong. They're all over the place in their space if it's disorganized, which drains you. But if it's organized, then you're calmer, you slow down, and you're less likely to be in that fight or flight hamster reactionary mode, which is very indicative when people are struggling with their mental health. And as far as the values go and your life purpose, because you're wasting so much less time looking for things, being distracted, you can then really channel all your energy into things that are important to you. And then there's less excuses like, oh, I didn't have time, or I couldn't do this. And so it just makes it a lot easier is the short answer.
Never really thought of it that way. And it makes so much sense. I love that.
Thank you.
So Tanya, what have you noticed clients have tried before and why hasn't it worked?
I know for me, because I'm the guinea pig for everything first, anything I've tried with clients, I do first.
Okay.
And I remember when I first had my first apartment, it was neat, it was clean, but I would have piles of stuff on surfaces. And things didn't have a home because I had more than what I needed. So I would move things from one place to another. And then maybe I would move a few things, but then I'd still have those piles, like for example, on my desk, that was the big one. And then I found that I was constantly reorganizing. But if you only have what you need, you don't have to reorganize. That's another key factor. People, myself and people in general, keeping things that they don't need, because then you have more stuff. It doesn't fit in the space you have. You don't need an addition in your house. You don't need another solution. You need to let go. Another thing is noticing how if someone's not willing to notice their inner patterns, then nothing's going to change. So that's a big thing where people aren't willing to do that. So then they just try the storage solution. That would be another one. And I think the big one is, now that there's so much exposure to information online, people will just research, oh, okay, 5 ways to organize your home. These are things to implement after you've gone through a process, after you have this awareness. Those are strategies at the end. And so things like, oh, if I buy one item, I'll get rid of one item. That's not going to work. And I find that a lot of people tend to do those tricks or life hacks, and then it's not helpful.
Because it seems like you're saying there's an emotional piece attached to a lot of, and if you don't deal with that first, then the long-term solution is not there.
No, and it's not a solution. That's the thing. Like it's just
a lifestyle.
Yeah, it's a lifestyle. Exactly.
Awesome. And what are some common barriers for people that you've come across with your coaching?
I would say one is cost. And I would like to challenge some people on that one, because if someone is willing to look at how they're spending their money, if spending $10 here, $10 there, 20 here, 20 there on things they don't need, and then they put that all together and reinvest it in themselves, that would be possible for everyone. But that's definitely, I find that sometimes people use that as an excuse because they're actually not ready. And that doesn't mean everyone, but I have noticed that when I've done my pre-assessment. The other thing I would say, and one of the biggest ones, is that change is hard. And not everyone is ready to do it. And it's hard work. And it's not a one-time thing. It's an ongoing process. When you choose to grow, you never stop. And so some people are in that place where they're not in that mindset. And so to switch over is huge. But if someone's already in that place and that's how they've always lived their life, then it's less of a barrier. And that brings the other one in, and that's the unwillingness to change. And a resistance comes up no matter what, no matter how excited someone is. Everyone that I've worked with, resistance is normal. It's just how much and how intense is it? Is it just a little bit and then they're able to work through it? Or is it just like, nope, I'm not changing this, and they're not willing to see that it's not helpful? Another one, surprisingly, is family members. And it goes both ways. So if I'm working with someone and they're blaming the family member for the mess, they're not willing to look at how, well, they're not being accountable, they're not on their part. The other aspect of that is if they really do have a partner that is more extremely messy, then it's hard for them to maintain the space because of the person that they're living with. So that's definitely one. Attachments, huge barrier for people. And everyone has different kinds, and we all have common ones that I notice. And people being connected to themselves and their values, because that helps them make decisions. So if they're not connected to themselves and their values and their boundaries, when they have to let go, they really struggle, because they don't do that on a daily basis. So that's why this is mirror reflections, because when we go through the process, they're like, oh, wait a second, how is this like other areas of my life?
So that actually hits my next question, is how is changing on the inside a part of the process?
It's probably 80%.
Yeah.
It's probably most of it. Because if you're not willing to look at what's going on the inside, and when I say that, I mean your thoughts, your beliefs, the stories you tell yourself, your habits, your routines, everything, then no storage solution, no life habit, no life hack is going to work, really. And, you know, I know people who often, both like people that I know and clients that I've had, who are like, oh, I just need to get another storage solution. Oh, we just need more closets. Oh, we just need more of this. No, you don't. You need to stop shopping, is what it is. You are using shopping. You're shopping through your emotions, and you're not willing to look at that. And that's what the issue is. I've seen that often. So you can't, and unless you really want it, like get to the root of the problem, you can't do it unless you look on the inside.
And I can imagine as well, what's coming up for me is that a lot of people probably have their identity attached to all of this.
Huge. And the irony is that all the clients I've worked with, I always see common patterns, like common threads. It's universal. The story might be a little bit different, but the base attachment and the base like identity thing is the same.
Between all your clients, that's what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Wonderful. So how did your process evolve over time?
It's funny because I think my intentions were always the same, but how I did it and was I doing it well definitely changed. When I started, it was like, oh, I'm a professional organizer and I'm helping you organize your space. And I remember my first client, I went right in and was helping them with time management. I was helping them with habit changing, budgeting. However, I wasn't communicating that on my website. I wasn't being very clear that this process involved you changing, and it wasn't just about storage solutions. So I ended up getting a lot of clients in the beginning where we didn't go very far because I was challenging them and they did not like that. They were so insistent on it just being about storage solutions. So then I started to go, okay, what do I need to change? Because I was doing assessments where I would walk around their house. They would tell me, you know, this doesn't work. And they would be full of excuses. Like it was just an of excuses. And I was like, okay, this is not working. So I switched over to focusing on kind of doing something more of like a life coach, where it's like, what areas of your life do you want to work on? So for example, spiritual, your health, and your relationships. And then how can we fix your spaces to align with that? And then once I started doing that, it evolved to the 3 steps of minimize, organize, sustain. Then it evolved to 5, because I realized that goal setting and planning needed to be separate. And that goal setting actually was more about value setting. And so it's evolved a lot. I did a lot of blog writing, and then that would keep on allowing me to develop different reflection questions that I would ask in sessions and that I leave for clients afterwards. And definitely more clear that this process is about change. And that's evident in my blogs, it's evident on the website now, and it's evident in the handbook that I've created. So it's definitely more clear.
Okay. And are you finding it's working for a lot of your clients now?
Yeah. Yes. And I'm getting good feedback in that the more I study and the more I train, I'm learning to ask the right questions, because that's really how I see my role. I'm not telling people what to do. I'm asking the right questions for them. And obviously, it's a combination of teaching. That's why I like it. It's a combination of teaching, consulting, and then just like listening and asking the right questions, and them saying this works, and then me being able to continue to do it with them.
Yeah, that totally just brought it up for me too. It's like, what questions do you ask the kids as a teacher so that they can see it and they can understand and learn?
Exactly.
Not from you telling them. And that's
They'll
where
never remember it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's where the change is going to happen for them, for sure.
And I talk a lot, so I'll give examples. I give a lot of examples. I find that's helpful.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, because it's relatable, right?
Yes.
Great. So we're very excited. We're going to talk about your process. So what does it look like? And I have a deck that I'm going to share with everyone as well.
Okay. And so are you on screen, or am I just going to speak to it?
Yep, I'm going to pull it up right now for you.
Okay, perfect. I can start without it. So the first step, as mentioned, is value setting. And that's so important because if it does a lot of different things. One, if you know your values, you know what your expectations are. If you know what your expectations are, then you know what goals you need to set. And then you know what you need to be accountable to. So it creates a lot of clarity for people, because I think a lot of people have a general sense of what's important to them. But when they're being asked directly to describe what it looks like in their life, they're like, oh. And sometimes, it takes a little while to get those answers. And then from there, it's like, okay, these are your values. We see a disconnect in your space. We see a disconnect in your time and your habits. These are the goals. What are we going to focus on first? And I do like to do space first, but within that, what are we going to do first? And what's a realistic time frame? Because if we're doing it only once a month, it's not going to be effective. It's best if someone can do the work once a week. And then I give homework. That's where the teacher in me comes at. And then we map something out that's realistic and manageable with their time, their resources, and the support that they're getting, because it is going to be an uncomfortable process at times. And then from there, we hear the word declutter. We hear, Mariko's process of only keep what you love and what sparks joy. But what this part is really about, two things. One, letting go of what doesn't align with your values and the goals that you've made. And that's not just physical space. It's how you're spending your time, your beliefs, your thoughts, your habits, your routines. It's everything. And so although we space, those other areas kind of get addressed indirectly as we go through the process. And then more directly when we work with time and habits. The next one is the fun part, and not as intense, is organizing the space in a way that's simple with what's left. And what happens is that people start to realize, they'll go back the next week and they'll be like, oh, you know what? Now that's all organized and there's less, and my clothes aren't all crammed in my closet. I'm noticing I'm not wearing this, this, and this, and I let it go. So it's an ongoing thing. And then the last piece is just as important, I would say, is step 3, is that inner work of, okay, now that we've done all this and I've noticed all these things about myself, let's be more specific about what I want to change, and let's make a plan and let's do it. And that includes being accountable and having an accountability plan. And so within that step, there's actually 5 steps. So it's quite the process.
How long has this taken you to develop? How many years?
7 years.
Okay, great. Was that the only slide you had to share?
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. So now everyone has an idea of your 5 steps. And I'm just going to stop sharing. Okay. Okay, so we talked about the upwards spiral process. It has 5 steps. So how long does it take to go through the process?
It depends on the person. So there's been times where I do the assessment and then I do a 4 package grouping. Sorry, 4 session package. And so sometimes it will take those 5 sessions and then the person will be good. I would say good, like 3 months is ideal, sometimes 6. Sometimes it's taken longer. It depends if a person has like a huge house and we're dealing with the whole entire house. I've had one client that I worked on and off for years because he's doing different renovations in the home. So it really depends on the individual, but I would say around 3 months is the average.
Okay. And where do you start seeing the change? Is it within a week or is it after a few months once they've done a few things?
I would say it depends on what aspect you're asking, because if it's awareness, it's right away.
Okay.
I would say after the first decluttering session, which also includes like us organizing stuff, they're noticing a positive effect and their ability to focus. Does it mean that particular area is 100% and they're able to maintain it? No, but there's definitely a shift. And that's why it's so important to go through the whole process, because maintaining it is the last step. Yeah.
And it's easy for us to get caught back in our old patterns too,
Oh,
right?
100%. If you've been doing something for so many years, you're not just going to snap out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I can definitely appreciate the maintaining part is a process in itself.
Exactly.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you so much, Tanya. I'm going to pass it over to Lee now, who has some questions for you as well.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Tanya. So I'm going to talk about or ask you questions around minimizing. So first, I'd like to ask you, can you talk about your definition of hoarding?
I made up my own.
Okay.
I used to belong to the Professional Organizers of Canada, and they had organizers who specifically dealt with people who were hoarders. And there's actually, I think, 4 or 5 levels of hoarding. And they got very specialized training because that is a mental illness when it reaches that point. That those shows where, to me, they're exploiting people that are hoarders. It's quite intense. For me, I look at it more as, what is your relationship to your belongings, and are you holding on to things for the wrong reasons? That's how I see it. Because you could have a space that is not completely crammed, and you could still be a hoarder if you're holding on. It to me, it's holding on to something and not being willing to let go.
When it no longer serves a purpose in your life.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
And that really kind of leads into, what makes it hard for, right? Yeah.
Yes. This is one of the ones that, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I'll ask the other question after. So what makes it hard for people to let go?
So there's a few different ways to look at it. In the readings that I was doing and looking at different attachment styles that we have in relationships, there's the anxious, there's the avoidant, there's the secure, and I think there's like another combination one. I thought, wow, I wonder if that shows up in people's spaces. So if you're anxious and you're always thinking, what if, in your relationships and in your life, are you doing that with your belongings? So that's one aspect of attachments.
Okay.
The other aspect, and this is like, I would say 90% of people have the what if. I'm going to say 99. I don't think I've ever had a client that hasn't said, what if I need it? That's a very common one.
Okay.
Guilt is another big one. And that happens a lot when people feel bad because someone's given them something that they don't like or that they've never used. And they're afraid that person's going to ask them, oh, where's that thing? Even though that person may never come to their house or they have that trouble. And that's where setting boundaries comes in. Another one is that people spent a lot of money on it. So it's the idea that, okay, let's say you buy a big item, you never used it, still has the tags on it, but you don't want to let go of it because you spent a lot of money. That money is gone, it's not going to come back. And is it bringing value to your life? So how can you flip that perspective? And is it bringing something value to your life as opposed to the money that's gone, right? And the what if, just to go back to that one, it's definitely fear and anxiety attached to that.
Mm.
And that comes with belief systems. That's another one where people are so attached to how they do things. And this falls into time management attachments. It has to be done this way, right? And so I myself struggled with that a bit because I spent so much time doing this, but then if someone else comes in my space and they're like, well, doing it like this, it's like, what are you doing? So I even have to be aware of that, right? And it's being convinced that, and with that, that's also an idea of perfectionism and not delegating.
Mm.
And, you know, or even attachment to a belief that I can't do it. So there's many aspects to that idea attached to belief. People are like, oh, I'm organized, I'm disorganized, I can't be organized. Well, can you learn something? Because if you can learn something, then you can learn to be organized. So it's switching those beliefs. Attachments to habits, that's another one. And definitely emotional interpersonal. So that's sentimental. We give value. We place our emotions on a physical object. So if I had a white t-shirt, it's just a white t-shirt. But if someone else has the same white t-shirt, they might be so attached to it because maybe they wore it to a special day in their life and they don't want to let it go.
Yeah.
But it's still a t-shirt, right?
Yeah.
And that's where the identity comes in. And I think you had mentioned that earlier, Lisa, where people are attached to their identity through their belongings. So they belong through belongings. I would also say one that I've noticed more recently is environmental. So people, environmental.
Okay.
So people thinking that, you know, if they don't keep all these glass jars, they're contributing to pollution, for example. And so how is making your home a recycling dump helpful? How is that helping, right? How is that helping you? So those are some. There's lots for time, but just because of time, I won't go over them.
No,
Those are some of the ones I've noticed.
Yeah, and how do you help people to let go? Like that comes up because I know as a coach working with people, because you talk about, right, it really comes down to what we believe, right? Why
Exactly.
we think we need this. So how, you know, I work with the unconscious mind, doing that, help people let go of these limiting beliefs. And, you know, again, when we think we have to keep this because of
exactly
when the other person may not even care, you know, that they in that sense. But how do you navigate that with your clients?
There's a few things I do. One, I don't know if I want to give my secrets away. I ask questions fast, and I do that on purpose.
Okay.
So I'll say on a scale 1 to 10, how important to you? That way they just respond, and it's like it's an impulse answer, so that the truth comes out. So and they might say,
unconscious mind, then
yes,
it's not there.
Yes. So then
the right answer. Yeah. Okay.
Instead of mulling over it, they're just like, oh, it's a 7. And it's like, okay. So I like to use scales because then they get to see where they are. I'll ask, how important is it to you? How often do you use it? So I'll use simple things like that. Another thing is that anytime we specifically decide where they're donating items prior to going through a category, that in itself helps. I had a recent client that left things on the curb and people came and thanked her. They knocked on her door and thanked her. And that just motivated her to let go of so much more because she knew who it was going to. And then it kept on happening, which was magic. So that's another one. And then being able to share the story. I think being able to let go in any kind of healing experience is when you are truly heard and someone listens to you and doesn't judge and just there, and you're able to release that, boom, it's gone. And so I find that very powerful as well.
That's awesome. And now you touched on the attachment styles. Was there anything else that you wanted to to delve into there with regards to, why it makes hard for people to let go and how that, interweaves with attachment styles?
Yeah, I think it's really about that inner work, and just we are on autopilot most of the time. And so I think slowing down is such a huge part of this, and really reflecting, like, how important is this? And so if people are willing to take that time and to look at that, then it makes the process easier. And then they start noticing it on their own. And then the next week they're like, oh, Tanya, like, then those aha moments start coming.
Yeah, because I think we do, like you said, we're on autopilot. We're our unconscious mind. It's good because it keeps us safe and allows us to drive our cars and brush our teeth. And yet
Right.
we're doing so many things that we've just done out of habit, and we don't even realize why we're, keeping all those jars. We just, in the back of our mind,
Exactly.
we grew up, thinking, yeah, you need to conserve and save. And yet now I've got all these things that I just, are cluttering my house.
Exactly.
The next question I have for you is, what do you notice about people's ability to understand their emotions?
I would say, I don't want to be harsh, but I would say that a lot of people don't. A lot of people avoid them. They're disconnected from them, and they keep busy to avoid feeling. I see that a lot. And our culture doesn't support it either. We're discouraged to feel. It's all about being positive and optimistic and being happy and do this to be happy. And so they do things like eating through their emotions, shopping through their emotions, watching TV through their emotions, instead of actually slowing down and feeling. So that's a very avoidant society. And sorry, I wasn't sure if you're going to ask me something. I want to keep on going, but I know you were going to ask me another question related to it. So I don't know if I want to jump into it yet.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. So what I did was I started to create like a sub process where I help people check in with their emotions, because it is so important, because that is information. Your emotions are your physical responses. And then your feelings are the story. And it's your interpretation of those physical responses. And so the more people are able to do that and be okay with discomfort, the better. And see that it's information and it's an opportunity to grow.
And really, how do you tie this into all your work?
I have like strategic steps, but at this time we're human, right? So it's a lot of conversation with client. It's pausing a moment where they're struggling emotionally. And then in that moment, it's like, okay, then we need to take this session in this direction, and we need to address this emotion, and we need to talk about the story, and we need to look at how is this affecting you in other areas of life aside from your physical spaces.
Yeah, I think we often don't realize with certain things, when you come across whatever, it's like, oh, there's a reason I've been holding on, even though I haven't been aware of it. And in bringing that up, all of a sudden there's emotions around, oh, yeah, there is still ties to that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's information. It's not something to be afraid of.
Yeah. And
as long as there's support, that's the other. A lot of the times people are afraid to ask for help. And so doing it on your own, to me, doesn't make sense. We're in a culture where there's been such a push to be independent and such a pull away from community, that it's this idea that if I can't do it alone, there's something wrong with me.
Right.
And it's the complete opposite. Being dependent on others is actually a healthy thing. And so I think that ties into it as well, as people realizing, well, actually, I need support with this. And so often I love, and I was doing this today in the webinar that I was in, someone had asked, do your processes deep? Do you suggest people see a therapist? I said yes. So my favorite is when I have clients that are seeing some sort of counselor, because we can identify the story, we can reframe it, we can get strategies on how to deal with it and how to connect with it differently. I can't discuss why it got there. I can't dig into that. That's a therapist's job. So that's the difference between a therapist and a coach. So it definitely, I myself have to set that boundary and be clear when that does happen.
And yeah, that when we look at it like as a coach, I'm not even necessarily interested in the why, but how we do our problem, right? It's how
Oh
we
yes,
run our
yeah,
strategies. Really, in the end, why whatever happened, it's how we do our problem. And so in uncovering that, and that's where often the difference is made.
exactly. It's just information. It's all information.
Mhm. Yeah, and not repeating the same thing over if it's no longer the result. Like, what are you focusing on, right?
Yeah,
There's no failure,
yeah,
there's only feedback. So if you keep getting the same feedback that's not what you want, okay, where are you focusing? And now how do you redirect that focus? Whether it
yes.
be
I
your
like that.
or whatever you're thinking in your head, right? Whatever we
Yeah,
think, we end up over time bringing into us.
exactly. I love that it's not failure, it's feedback. That's
Yeah,
an excellent way to put it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, and I'd love to ask you the next question. So, what can a person do to be more self aware and connected to their emotions and values in your perspective?
Slow down, I would say, is the first thing. Slow down. Um, and get support, because again, doing it on your own, it's not realistic. It's definitely not realistic. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a professional. It could be someone that you trust, someone that you have a close relationship with, and a professional. As many people as possible is ideal. What I did within my process is that I made a 4-step process. And in that, the first step is, okay, well, what's going on in your body? That's the first step. Are you feeling tense? Are you noticing that you're like, crunching your shoulders? Do you feel that your heart rate is up? And then say, well, what's going on? What is the story attached to that? What is the feeling that is connected with that? And then processing that information. That can be through journaling, through talking to someone. Everyone's different. I do both. And through that information, it's like, okay, well, what is it that I need? Because a lot of the times it could be so simple as a glass of water. I need a glass of water. But if we're not connected to our body and being reactionary, and we're not, oh, I didn't eat yet. Oh, I was supposed to eat my lunch and I got so busy. And so if we're not paying attention to our body, then we're missing a lot of information. And then we end up in this extreme state.
Mhm.
And then we might do something that worsens it, for example, like shopping through our emotions, eating through emotions, and whatnot, right? And so once you need, then it's looking at, okay, well, where do I need to adapt? Because there has to be a piece of change. So yes, I got my glass of water, but what do I need to change so this doesn't happen? Maybe I get so excited when I'm working, I forget that I have to eat. Maybe I need to put a timer on my phone and actually have a reminder. And then eventually it will just happen automatically that I remember, oh, at 12, I need to eat my lunch.
Right.
That's one way. Another thing that I highly recommend for people to be more self-aware and connected to their emotions is definitely some sort of movement, meditation practice, whatever works for you. Like there's no one set thing. Some people do qigong, tai chi, yoga, dance. I love dance. I absolutely love dance. Journaling, and any sort of thing where you're slowing down. Even walking meditation is great. A group walking meditation is even more exciting because
Mm.
it's this collective slowness that helps you slow down, and you can kind of, it has a different energy to it when you do it with other people. Same with group meditation. So anything where you are checking in with yourself, and then ongoing strategies where you are slowing down and connecting with your body as a practice, not just, oh, how am I feeling right now? What's going on? But I'm going to sit down and meditate. That's my practice, for example.
So beautiful. I love that you've got this such a robust process that you take people through.
Thank you.
So the next question, how do lack of boundaries create clutter especially around time, space, and spending?
Ooh, spending. Spending's a big one. So often I have clients that don't actually have a budget. They don't do a monthly budget. They don't know how much they're spending, and then they just spend. And so if you're not setting boundaries around, okay, what do I value? I value my health and well-being and spending time with family, for example. And so that means that I put a chunk of my spending on food. I'm not going to be spending money on photographs and hanging them up all over my apartment. So it's making sure that you set that boundary based on your values. With regards to space, ironically, if you think about it, if you have a hard time saying no to people and you're always saying yes, is that also going to show up in your space? So do you have your paper on your kitchen counter? Do you have things in the kitchen that belong in another room? And you're not setting boundaries in your space. Are you not setting boundaries with people? So that's where these mirror reflections come in, and you can start saying the patterns of, okay, I'm disorganized, but how is this also playing a role in my relationships with people? How is this playing a role in my time? Because if I'm saying yes to everybody and I have no time for self-care, but I value self-care, there's a disconnect there, right? And so that's where, like, I'm just going to jump back to the emotional intelligence stuff and the self-awareness that we were talking about. That's where that's so helpful. Because if you're self-aware, if you are able to connect with yourself and be empathetic with yourself, you can be empathetic with others. So then it helps you create those boundaries. You have self-respect. You are able to better implement boundaries. You are better at communicating. So if you have high EI, for example, people tend to be really great communicators. They're great in relationships, and they're better able to manage their stress. So then their spaces are more organized. So all these things are connected, all these skills. Same with growth mindset, right? If you have a growth mindset, then you're more likely to be able to go through a process where you can get organized because you're willing to change. So none of these things are separate.
No, I can really see how this is such a robust process. And just talking about boundaries, how I think for many of us, setting boundaries is a difficult thing, and we don't even realize. I grew up with some, in a family where there weren't clear boundaries, and they were always, something was said, and then that person went back on it. So it was like, I realized, like, a boundary doesn't mean a boundary. And so I think many of us come into, not understanding that people can't read our minds and know where our boundaries in life are.
Exactly.
Right? So in creating the clarity, not only in our personal relationships, but in our space, all of a sudden, when it's something that is not innate in you, you don't realize that you're not setting them. And why is someone doing that to me? And you don't realize that it's offensive. So yeah, it's wonderful that this is part of your process and how it creates clarity in people's lives.
100%. And it's a process in itself, right? Because if someone hasn't been setting them, and then all of a sudden realize this in a session, and then they're like, oh my goodness, that's huge. Like, I have to say this to this person. How am I going to do that?
Yeah.
And so it's really about identifying what all the expectations are, and then just taking one small piece of that and starting with that one small piece. Not, you've never done it before. You're in this relationship, and then all of a sudden you say, okay, I have these 10 boundaries and you need to do this from now on. It's not going to work. And then the other person's not going to be able to receive it well. So it's a process in itself to be able to do that. And it will take time, but the positive side of it, and the most powerful thing, is that a person is then in their power, and they are living their true self. They're connected to their values, important to them. And then that boosts their self-esteem and their self-worth. And then they're more likely to do self-care. So it's all connected.
Yeah, has such a spillover effect in all all areas of life. Absolutely. And I think you wanted to maybe throw that out to
Yes.
the group. Yeah.
So how are lack of boundaries creating clutter in your life? That's what I was curious to ask. If anyone in the audience is aware of which boundaries they're not setting that's creating clutter for them. And are we going to look at those in the chat, or people, how do people normally share?
Yeah. If people want to put, throw that in the chat, that would be awesome. If you're willing to do that.
I'm trying to think for myself. Where do I would say definitely setting boundaries around my time in the past,
Mhm.
and like getting sucked into maybe being online a little bit and not being aware, and then like a half an hour goes by and I'm like, whoa, what just happened? So that I addressed, and it's really about stopping and going, okay, I'm on this platform, why am I on it, and how long do I want to be on it for? So that was definitely one that I worked on.
Yeah, and I would say with emails, kind of, oh, that was Lisa. So Lisa with time, Lisa is also with time. Yeah, and I would say with emails, kind of the boundaries of how I answer emails and organize my emails and how I do that. That's been a big thing for me.
Yeah, and when to answer them, and having notifications. Oh my goodness, that drives me nuts. I didn't realize, like, I have no notifications on my phone unless I get a message, like from text messaging, and that's it. And I didn't realize how much people have these notifications, and then it's constantly pulling them away from the present moment.
Yeah, I'm amazed. I was with someone recently and it sounded like, it was like a slot machine every time a text went off, and
Oh,
I was just,
yep.
yeah, it had me every time turning, and I thought, oh my gosh, how could you concentrate and go through your life when, yeah, you haven't, and again, what one person finds calming, or how they can function, and for someone else, when you're not, in that kind of space, it's like, wow, that was big for me, and in distraction for sure.
And I think too, people don't realize it's an issue until they something completely different.
Say that again.
So people don't realize something's an issue until they see that something is unless they try something completely different.
Right.
So someone is always used to having those notifications. Unless they're in an experience where there's none, they can see, they see the contrast, and they see, well, oh, this feels different. And so that's why change is good. So if you're always doing the same thing, it doesn't allow you to notice that.
And how you might feel, yes, less stressed and more relaxed, and
Exactly.
and things, yeah, and it's like, oh, I can focus on, and oh, it's easier, and yeah,
Exactly.
things
Exactly.
change. So what I'd like to look at right now is, you in your blogs, you look at different psychology theories, and how does psychological flexibility play a role in getting your life organized?
That's a newer one that I delved into. And psychological flexibility basically is talking about how flexible you're willing to be. And there's different areas that I'll get into in a minute. And so someone who's mentally healthy and strong, they're more able to adapt to change. When someone is not willing to adapt, they're inflexible, they're rigid in the way they do things. And this is actually an indicator of mental health, as someone is extremely rigid and completely inflexible. So they're good kind of red flags to kind of note, where am I on the spectrum of mental health and mental illness? Because if you get stuck in that rigidity, then you're going to end up in a downward spiral. And so something that I do with my clients, and it's part of the last step, and that is looking at, well, how am I being flexible with my thinking, or inflexible for that matter?
Right.
How am I being inflexible with my emotions? Are my emotions taking over the situation? And then the last one is there something in my environment that needs to change? And with that, I have a lot of questions that they can then ask themselves so that they can see like, okay, well, yeah, you know what? This fear is taking over. What can I do? And that's one of the things is inflexibility is not usually, but one of the main things is fear. So how can you overcome this fear? How can you get support? Another piece is accountability, and how can you be accountable to someone so that maybe you were inflexible in the situation this time and then you switched, and then the next time you're back to being rigid. So unless you have someone to work through it, it's not going to change. The connection to being organized, I would say, is definitely, if I'm rigid, I'm not willing to let go. If I'm rigid, I'm not willing to adapt and change my environment. I'm not willing to look at doing things a different way. And so if someone's being completely inflexible, then I can't help them. It's also connected with the 5 stages of change, one being pre-contemplation, contemplation, action, and then I think maintenance. And if someone's in pre-contemplation, they don't even see that there's a problem. And so that can be connected to being inflexible as well.
And that really leads, what do you see is the one key thing that people are lacking in their ability to change?
I would say one, definitely not going through a process. And if they do, completing it. Because I've had clients where there's like great results, we're not done yet, and then they go on their own. And the issue with that is that we're not able to go through the whole thing to get to the root of the problem, because we're only just starting to see it, but there's that integration piece that needs to be done. And with that is accountability. And accountability is so huge. And I'm even seeing that with myself now. I recently started having a workout buddy, and I was always active. I would always go for a walk or go for a bike ride each day, but being active and working out are 2 different things, and I didn't realize that. Yeah. And so it makes a difference, because you have to answer to someone. You have to own your actions to someone else. And so I'm actually going to be writing about accountability for the next 4 months in my blog. I do a blog newsletter once a month, because it is so huge. It's so huge. And it's big with relationships. So it's not just I'm being accountable to the things I want to change for myself. How am I being for my relationships? How am I being accountable at work? And so it's all areas of your life.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think accountability is super helpful. And I was with a group, we would send healing intentions every morning at 6:30. I've been doing it for the last year. And I am the person that stays up, or was the person that would stay up till like, I'm a late night person. And all of a sudden, this group started. It was the Power of 8, sending healing intentions. And we would get up and on Zoom at 6:30 in the morning, we would send for 15 minutes healing intentions to someone that was, struggling. Okay. And he had done it for a year, the person that we were doing this with. And on Monday, it was like, he decided, he'd done it for a year, and all of a sudden something that had kept me accountable and had changed a habit for me was like done. Wow. And it was really interesting. And so Lisa and I have been doing this. We're both on the call. And so we decided that we were going to be accountable to each other and continue, because we'd already developed the habit, and there was a reason to get up. Because for me, the only reason I would get up at 6:30 would be to get on a plane going somewhere, right? Like I've never been that person. I don't have kids. Yeah. So for me, it was never get up early to, like I never wanted to jog at 6:30 in the morning, but to send and start my day to change my habit and be grateful and send healing to someone else, and then do my meditation practice. It's changed my life. It's been, and that changed. So I'm now like, okay, what do I put into place? And yeah, so I can see how powerful that was. And if I let it slide, well, maybe I'll start getting up at 7:30 or later. So
exactly. And I don't want to, like, it kind of sounds in a negative connotation, but you don't have to answer to anyone. Like when you're just answering to yourself, it's not the same. We're human, we're social creatures. That's why it's needed. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's a good thing. It helps us stay connected with people.
Yeah.
And then it's a great place to get feedback and ask for feedback.
Yeah.
So to give and to receive, and then that allows you to continue to grow. So that's the other aspect of accountability.
Oh, it's so powerful. I really love that you have, like I mentioned, created this beautiful process, but it's been through, your expertise, not only as a teacher and what you studied in the psychology background that you had, and then you're learning from what worked and what didn't work with your clients, that you have this ever evolving kind of spiral process, right?
Yeah.
And I think that in life, as lifelong learners, it's like what works, what doesn't work, and how can we, like you said, help people stay accountable to what they most want in their life. Because for one person, it's going to be very different than someone else. One person's good enough is different than someone else's. This is
exactly
good, right?
Exactly.
So, and being that coach to be able to see what does this person need to be able to, live their best life and feel, comfortable with their environment, with their space, with how they move through it and live in that space.
Exactly.
So thank you for all of that. So I'd love to open the floor to questions. So whether people want to put up their hand, their little virtual hand, and unmute, or you can put the question in the chat box, whichever feels right for you.
I mean, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
How do you navigate, you talked about being in a relationship, if one of you is like, I'm like super organized, and my partner, he's still learning to to be on the same level as me, let's put it that way.
Watch this after.
Yeah. Yeah. So any like suggestions or?
I'm working on it. I would say I think it goes down to creating that foundation in your relationship. And so doing a value exercise. What do you both value? What's the life you want to create? And then what does that look like in your space? Because unless you have, and this is the accountability piece, unless you have clear expectations, like I can deal with not being in the closet, but I cannot deal with the big sofa. You know what I mean? Like if you're that specific, then you can be flexible. Because for me, I don't like anything on the surfaces. Whereas for him, he's like, well, no, it's our home. You wanna make it look like you live there. It's okay with a few things. So it's negotiating and being very clear with like, this is a non-negotiable for me. Okay, so I can deal with, and setting that up.
Okay.
And making it a process where you're both involved, right? Where you're both creating that space, because same thing with a classroom. If you organize it by yourself, I'm creating a course for teachers. And the biggest thing is getting your class involved. Because if you do it, they're not going to maintain it, but they got involved and it was their idea to put the pencils over there. They're going to keep it that way, right? Because, it was my idea and I like this and it works for me. Right?
I love that. Thank you so much.
That impression. Oh, you're freezing there.
Can you hear us?
Oh, I think she may be frozen there. Oh, are you back? There you go, I think. Can you hear us, Tanya?
Okay, I was just typing to you guys. I'm like, am I frozen? I can see myself.
You were frozen for a second there.
Okay, there you go.
Oh, thank you so much, Tanya. That was very, very helpful and insightful. So get started tonight.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. That's probably one of the biggest challenges, is you can have someone who really is, organized and neat. And, my mom and dad are definitely that way, and my dad keeps everything. And my mom is always,
When it's the two polar opposites. Yeah, that makes it tricky.
Because he's almost on the side of, not a hoarder, but he has visions of projects. So, and it just, Yeah, so I'll need that. And then he can't find things, so he buys the multiple. the
Yes, I
multiple
had a
tools.
client like that. I had a client just like that. I think it's important for me to be with someone who has a growth mindset, because if they're willing to grow and change, then it doesn't really matter what area of life you're looking at, whether it's being organized or whether it's how you spend your time. It's something that you can create together.
Now, if that person doesn't have a growth mindset, so we look at couples that have been together a long time and you've got,
Yeah.
and they don't have common values, do you have any way that you're able to navigate that with people where they're really in kind of two different camps about how things are, and then the one person is always tidying up and cleaning and organizing, and the other person doesn't?
It's things. One, them organizing their own belongings so that that's them, that the other partner doesn't have anything to do with that. And then having one place in the home that the other person is not allowed to touch. Like having that space where they can have their peace and quiet and calm, like depending on how big the home is. But if it could be an actual room, that's one option.
And I think that is, it's again, the negotiation, right? Where you can,
exactly,
making it work for you and really for the other
everybody,
person.
which is hard.
Yeah, which is hard at times, because and it's what makes life interesting, that we all are different, because it would be very boring if we all were the exact same way.
Oh yes, oh yes,
for sure. So I don't know if anyone else has a question. Does anyone else have a question to throw in the chat? Oh, Jessica.
Hey.
Hello.
Tanya, I was so curious to hear what you had to say. I'm a fellow organizer, and I use I felt like as you were talking, I'm like, yeah, that's what I say. That's what I say.
Oh, nice.
Anyway,
oh,
very
nice.
similar. We have a very similar approach and do very similar work. So that's cool. So my question is actually, I'm curious what's been your experience since we've been in COVID with the work you're doing, and how has it shifted, and what have you noticed? I'm curious.
Ironically, I started doing online before.
Oh.
So, and because I do business design as well. And so I'm able to do it online, and I adapted that model prior. The other thing is I started doing work-life balance workshops for corporations, because it was a big struggle for people, because they couldn't set that boundary of when to stop working. And it was in their face all the time. And so I think that attention, like that direction of putting my energy in that area, that's definitely been something that's happened over the last year or so.
And how, now it was part of your question, Jessica, as well, how are people managing being at home and having, like, working from home and having, like,
I mean, I've just noticed, it's this ironic thing where we're spending more time at home. And I think people have felt like, wow, I should really be on top of my organizing because I'm spending all this time at home. Like, it should be great. And in fact, I don't really feel like doing it, or it's not great, it's worse, or it's whatever. It's not what they expected.
Because they're at home all the time, and it's in their face.
And kind of, and I think in my experience, and also working online and I mean, a few in person, but not very much, there's just this sense of like the should have, the bit of guilt around, God, with all this time that I have, like, shouldn't my place be in better shape? So,
when we should, when we should on ourselves, right? Again, because I think going back to probably the bigger conversation we've had is these beliefs is what is causing people to live their life the way they are and pile, or because I know I'm still a piler. So it's shifting that habit and it's a belief or something that I've always done that I haven't got to why I do this. And so it's that bigger thing of looking at. So perhaps that's kind of the going to what you're talking about, if that makes sense.
I think there's a lot of self-judgment, right? And I think in this kind of work, you have to, it's really, there's a lot of shame sometimes that comes with like, this is my space and this is what it is. And perhaps it, it should be better, right? And that sort of pressure from wherever it's coming from, friends, family, the outside, Pinterest, whatever. So I think you probably face that too, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you. Did you have another question, Jessica?
No, good.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Tanya. What an inspiring evening of and not shooting on ourselves, but actually, inspired by, how we can start to look at things a little differently and look at it as a process and as a whole. Because change takes change. I mean, that truly is right. We forget that, we want to change, and it's like we hope it magically happens, and it doesn't. It takes that effort and that investment and that willingness to be ready. Like we say we should, and then it's like, and then because it becomes hard, we walk away from it. So I think this is wonderful. And like you said, to have that accountability,
exactly,
a coach, for people like yourself to be able to be there and to help walk you through that process for those places where you get stopped and stuck, right? We do in life. And I think more than ever, being that we're much more separated, that to be able to have someone right now help us navigate is so powerful.
Yes, and crucial to change. Yeah, definitely.
Because I think that's I think it's the only thing we could have counted on before, but truly, all we can count on is that things are going to continue to evolve and change. So as we do that, being, on the leading edge of how to be okay with change, right? And you guys, being a coach around space and how you think about it is really powerful. So thank you for your time and expertise. And I'm just going to close the evening. So if everyone can just shut your eyes for a moment. And as we close our time together with gratitude to all, we pause to offer each other love and kindness. May our understanding of love be expanded by what we have shared as we open ourselves to growth. May we rest in trust and surrender ourselves and our past to divine grace, asking that this time together be protected, corrected, and held high. May we now see through love's eyes and understand beyond words. May we all be safe, happy, and healthy. May we all rest in full joy and know there is no distance between friends in time or space. Divine strength and peace surround us until we meet again. Open your eyes, and now over to Lisa for final announcements.
Thanks so much again, Tanya, for a great evening. And just to recap this evening, Tanya's top 3 learnings from her journey are that getting organized is more about looking within and making internal changes than it is about tips and storage solutions. Being organized helps you to honor your values, be more intentional, and become better with time management. And finally, becoming aware of your internal patterns allows you to make major transformative changes, specifically around your relationship to your belongings and how you spend your time. In our highlights email, we'll be sending Tanya's contact information. She offers one-on-one coaching and small group coaching for both companies and those who sign up for her workshops. And she will have an online course for teachers coming out next month, so stay in touch to get more details. And Tanya will also have her handbook available for sale next month. And those who are on the show today will receive the introduction section of it. And she's also giving out 10% off for an hour assessment with her if you get in touch. And if you're interested in learning more about Lee's coaching sessions, her information and contact details will be included in the follow-up email. Our next LeeLa event will be held on Wednesday, October 20th with Tara Canerva, who is a wise and humorous counselor and mentor to women who are figuring it out. In these challenging times, we're all a bit weary, confused, and unsure. Tara helps people reconnect inside themselves and feel as clear and resourceful as they possibly can. And until next time, everyone, be well, aloha, and good night.